The problem with precious metals is that you've got that potential big drop out there when stocks tank, and so you can see silver go back down to $12 easy. You can see gold to go back down to 1,400 or whatever very easily. These things could happen in a flash crash in the stock market. If they do tank, don't hold back. This is the time to back up the truck, because the Fed cannot let interest rates go up much more than they are. They cannot let the stock market tank, and they're going to have to take steps to prevent that. And gold and silver will probably respond to it. Well, we're back in the game that the Fed plays with the stock market every so often, where the Fed starts to panic because things are overheating. They start talking about tightening and tapering and raising interest rates, yada, yada. Everybody ignores them for a while. And then when it looks like they're actually going to go through with some of it, the stock market panics in its own right, tanks, and then scares the government into taking it all back. So we've been through several of these in the last, say, decade and a half. And every time it's played out the same way. So investors should, assuming it plays out the same way this time around, investors should, first of all, be very worried about their stock portfolios, because in order to cause the Fed enough angst to get them to take back the tapering, stocks have to fall in a panicky way. It has to be a scary drop in stock prices that looks like it doesn't have any obvious end in sight. And that's the thing that causes the Fed to cave. So you might have to expect that with your stock portfolio. And precious metals investors might have to expect that gold and silver get pulled down, although that hasn't happened yet, which is nice. But in previous episodes like this, they've been pulled down too. Gold and silver have gone down along with stocks. And then the Fed gives up at some point, starts flooding the system with cash again. Some of that cash goes into financial assets and precious metals, and everything goes back up. If you time it right in gold and silver, you can make a lot of money, because their moves tend to be very exaggerated because they're such small, illiquid markets compared to tech stocks or utilities or energy companies or whatever. So we have another chance again, for anybody who missed getting in at the very bottom of the last few cycles in precious metals, you might have another chance again this time around. But I think the really important thing about this iteration of the game is that it might be the last one, because this might be the time, with inflation rising, normally you would expect the Fed to be adamant about raising interest rates and tamping down inflation. So if they cave with inflation still 4, 5, 6% on the official gauges and 10 or 11% on the unofficial but more accurate gauges, that means they're giving up. There's no chance of controlling the decline in the value of the major currencies out there, because to do so would break the financial markets. And when everybody figures that out, that there's no adult supervision anymore in the financial markets, then all hell will break loose. And that's when you want to be loaded up in real assets. You want your farmland by that time. You want your rental house. You want your energy stocks. You definitely want your gold and silver, because those are the things that money will pour into when everybody else realizes that there's nothing left to prop up the dollar and the euro and the yen, and that the Fed is going to have to ease into inflation. And that's just all there is to it for as far as the eye can see. I think that eventually there's going to come a time when we just give up on fiat currencies, because it's clear the central banks can't support them anymore. And if the Fed starts easing while inflation is still, ridiculously high by the standards of their targets, then that might be the time, and then if we just give up on dollars and euros and all the fiat currencies, the whole concept is liable to fall into disrepute, then that's the end of those currencies as we know them. There might still be things with those names out there afterwards, but in the monetary reset that kind of has to flow from this, we may go back to a time when the world's currencies were just names for given weights of gold. The dollar was 1/20th of an ounce of gold. That's what the dollar was back in the day. And we might have to just do that. We might just have to go back to something like that. So we'd still be using something called the dollar, but its reality would be that it's a name for a fractional amount of gold. And what happens in a currency reset is that you, and this is the best case scenario where the governments of the world act rationally instead of just have the market force this on them, when they just declare that this is the change that's going to happen. We're going back to a commodity-based currency. It's going to be on these terms. Your previous dollars are going to be devalued by X amount, so that gives us a big burst of inflation. In other words, prices of many, many things go up in terms of dollars, which means the people who trust the government and hold a bunch of dollars going into that are the ones who get hurt. And the ones who see what's coming get out of their dollar-based investments in time and into real assets, they make out, and so it's kind of a trap that government incompetence and avarice is setting for regular people who aren't paying attention to this. If we do any good in this world, it would be to convince a few more people to see the truth of this and to get out of their dollar-based investments before it's too late. And I'm afraid that the way economic policy works in this world, the rich will see it coming, they'll do fine. A handful of people who are not rich but are paying attention will do fine. Everybody else is just going to be royally screwed. So I'm afraid that's what's going to happen. I wish it wasn't so, but that's the world we live in, and the sooner we figure it out in large numbers, the better it is. I think the gold and silver recovery has been nice, but it's nothing compared to what's happening. The problem with precious metals is that you've got that potential big drop out there when stocks tank, and so you can see silver go back down to $12 easy. You can see gold to go back down to 1,400 or whatever very easily. These things could happen in a flash crash in the stock market, which, the last few weeks in the stock market have felt like the prelude to some kind of big panic dump. So we could easily see that happen. So if you went out, you heard me saying there's urgency, and you went out and bought all your gold and silver right now, you'd probably regret it. So don't do that, because I don't want, a world full of enemies out there that I cost a ton of money for. But do understand that that's the dynamic. We've got this big risk out there with gold and silver. So keep some powder dry so you can pick some up at the bottom. And this time around, if they do tank, don't hold back. This is the time to back up the truck, because the Fed cannot let interest rates go up much more than they are. They cannot let the stock market tank, and they're going to have to take steps to prevent that. And gold and silver will probably respond to it. So, be buying now, be stacking now regularly, but be prepared to buy more if they put it on sale for you. If you see $12 silver, I'm not going to say mortgage your house, but I would be considering mortgaging my house for something like that. It's one of those things where we've missed a couple of those. A lot of us have missed a couple of those episodes, and this is the big one. So, don't do never invest any money in anything you can't afford to lose. But with your excess capital, with what you have that's beyond your emergency fund and the money that you'll need for the next 6 months to live, gold and silver, if they get whacked, will be a pretty good investment at that point. Don't forget, war is a big possibility right now too, and that just adds to the complexity. So, even if everything else is going along pretty well, you could see the U.S. and Russia start shooting at each other any minute in Ukraine, or the U.S. and China at the border of Taiwan. So stuff like that, which is a total wild card. And also something that happens during the night from a U.S. perspective means that we could wake up some morning and see that the world is in chaos, which just increases the urgency for us to get prepped, right? We need to be ready for a chaotic world one way or another, just because so many things could create that chaos in the near future.